Hello and welcome to the third episode of Connected Live. We hope you've had a very Merry Christmas and it's nice to greet you for tonight's show. Today, most TV channels will be playing a review of this year, but we'll be taking you back in time through the history of the KRONE agricultural machinery. With me here tonight is my colleague Niklas Beindorf. Warm welcome. Please introduce yourself. We think Niklas is a direct colleague of mine and spends a lot of his free time fixing up ag machinery, so he'd be better suited than him for the virtual present of the museum for you tonight. Hello and welcome from my side. Unfortunately, you cannot be with us in the museum tonight, but I think it'll be quite nice for us to do this virtually. What do visitors expect when they come to our museum? The museum opened in 2015. It was a wish from Bernard KRONE, third generation. It displays the history of the KRONE family and includes unique historic agricultural machines. It's the previous location of the LVD and 2,600 square meters in size. It also shows the progress in agricultural technology. It's definitely worth a visit. If you have any questions, please ask through our chat or send us an email to the address you see below. Let's start with the first video. We split the museum into 4 different parts. This is it from the outside. Once we step inside, this is the original office wing. Then we step inside the former office, which used to belong to Bernard KRONE, the first and second generation. It was used to greet customers and suppliers. Here we step inside the household and hardware store. And it was managed by Gertrude KRONE, which is Bernard KRONE's the second generation's wife, and she managed it from 1952 to 1968 and offered everything which was necessary at the time. Next, we step into the emotional room. Here's a lot to see from all around the world, including knittings, hammers, German Agricultural Cooperation medals, special gifts also. The most important gift in this room is the wooden Big X done by a customer from the USA. Next to the rooms we just saw in the video, here's the original office. It includes typical office equipment of the early 20s and 30s. On the left, we see a payslip typewriter to write the payslips of employees. On the desk, we see an antique calculator, a typewriter, things like post scales, and a very big investment in the 20s was a typewriter costing 800 Deutschmark. Here another view of the emotional room. We see a lot from all around the world. Knittings, ambers. On the right side, we see a cadastral map, which shows what the landscape used to look like before the KRONE company existed. Very interesting is the book on the table. It's the guest book, and it's there for guests to sign and to look back to who has visited the museum previously. Very interesting what people left messages for us. Here's a nice view for the hardware and household store. You see the very popular cutlery and porcelain. Or this whole exhibition room was beautifully set up by Marina KRONE. Very interesting is that the original porcelain of the KRONE family, and Maria actually bought it off her mother-in-law. So the porcelain has actually gone through the store twice in its lifetime. Go one step further. Here is a video of a reconstructed forge showing the whole beginning of the KRONE factory, which was a small forge back in the time. Bernhard KRONE started in 1906 with a very basic forge. Before they lived in Spelle, they were living in Ochtrup. They moved to Spelle in 1906 to take over the inherited business from Anna Evers, Bernhard's wife. Next to the forge is a room divider showing the whole history of the family, right up from the first generation to the fourth generation. Here's a remounted corn harvester and the KRONE Optimat manure spreader. Two very important innovations of the KRONE product range. As you just said, 1906 was the whole beginning. The Bernhard without the H and including the H in the name. In the first generation, there was an H in the name without. As of the second generation, they left out the H of the Bernhard name. Here's a very nice picture of the show forge. We reconstructed the whole forge in the exact position of where the original forge was originally created. We should mention Walter KRONE, Bernhard KRONE's cousin, who's put a lot of effort into setting up the whole museum. He used a lot of his contacts to find pieces to reconstruct it. The anvil is actually the original anvil used in the original KRONE forge. These are the two milestones of the KRONE product range. We had the rear-mounted corn harvester, the MC8 and the MC10. Why is it a milestone? Well, that's how we got into forage harvesting. And that's what the KRONE machines are all about today. They basically got us into the whole forage harvesting market. It was the it was the first row independent corn harvester with the collector principle. As we say today, a good cut actually starts at the collector. And that's how we got clean food for our cows. Next step was the MC16, and it could take up 3 rows of corn. We actually have a collector principle here where the plant is cut and falls to back into the chopper, and actually is very similar to the working principle of today choppers. The appearance of something similar recently, yes. Currently, KRONE has a feasible study going on for an auxiliary tractor mounted corn harvester. That's why KRONE, since the tractors are getting bigger and bigger, we are thinking about putting a corn harvester on the front of the tractor. Another milestone is the KRONE Optimat, and it's actually the first machine, KRONE machine, where we build a very large scale. Developed by Bernd Deutmann and Franz Holmberg from Kemper. And the first prototype was ready in just 4 weeks. And it's one of the most important products that we produce, and we built more than 200 trailers up until the 90s. We offer many different types of equipment variants available, like load gates and flatbed turntables. It was one element of the bestseller is still seen in today's product. Oh, one of the first round balers actually had a turning pressure chamber, which actually came out of the Optimat. If we have a look into the third room, here we see Lanz tractors, Hanomag Fendt. Here's the first car that Bernard ever bought, the Hanomag Quad. We have old cultivators right at the beginnings of the KRONE factory. Very early machines from the 20s. Things like beet cutters and straw cutters, and also the pasture water implement. The pasture water implement is actually one of the highlights, which was the first product we produced in series as of 1925. It's based on the 1925 imperial patent from a local farmer. And KRONE took over the patent. This pasture water implement enabled cows to pump their own clean water, and it was a big step for animal health. Here's a very nice picture from the tractors. And it basically shows the history of the distribution and service provider that KRONE used to be. And we began Lanz distribution of 1935. Alongside the tractor distribution and the forge really propelled KRONE forward. Many farmers came to Bernard and said, we want to buy a tractor, but we don't want to buy a Lanz tractor. The tractors weren't very innovative. They lacked in development and cumbersome and uncomfortable for drivers. So as of the 1950s, Bernard took on the distribution of Hanomag. Hanomag were much simpler, way more efficient and easier to operate. And that was a big, very successful step forward. So up until the 1970s, that's when we distributed Hanomag tractors. Is that all we have on display in the museum? No, we have a lot more to show. This is the fourth room of the museum. This is where all the interesting exhibit is. Here we see loader wagons, the very first big M, a very special highlight, the Lanz Landbau motor from 1917, a WD cultivator, and a John Deere forage harvester, a combine harvester, sorry. Very interesting pieces here, such as the first KRONE ground baler, one of the very first big pigs, and very interesting engine models. Not only to look at, but also to learn. What sort of three do we see here? On the left is the forefather of all KRONE loader wagons, based on the original KRONE Optimate.
Ganz ehrlich zu sein, das System hat nicht so hundertprozentig gut funktioniert.
To mount the pickup in the rear of the loader wagon wasn't a very good innovative decision, and that's why we actually relocated the pickup to the front of the machine only 2 years later. In the middle, we see an HSD, which really propelled KRONE forward in the loader wagon market, which had a knife unit and discharge rollers, which you could use for dry and wet harvest.
Ja, hier haben wir noch ein sehr schönes Bild aus der Erprobung des Allesladers und sehr interessant ist, dass wir an dieser Stelle sogar
Here's a picture of the Alleslader in the field at a test trial with Bernard KRONE, and he's viewing the prototype with very critical eyes. The whole KRONE family was always very technology.
Ja, genau, hier sehen wir jetzt Bernhard KRONE zweite Generation und ich glaube, hier die Person auf diesem Trecker dürfte doch manchmal auch bekannt sein.
Here we have a Loadmaster TS3 with Bernard KRONE, the third generation, sitting in the driver's seat.
Das heißt, auch hier sieht man, ist jemand, der aus der Landwirtschaft gekommen ist, beziehungsweise der sein Herz immer sehr nah an der Landwirtschaft hat.
Ja, vom Ladewagen sind wir ja jetzt schon beim nächsten Produkt.
From the loader wagons, we go to the next topic, the Emsland Kipper. Many people will know about this product. Even my parents at home in the Sauerland had an Emsland Kipper. It was developed in the early 60s, after we already in the 1948 had our rubber wheel trailers offered. But as of the 60s, we had the hydraulic tippable Emsland trailer. We built thousands of these right up to the late 1990s, even into the 2000s, 2003, 2004. Why don't we produce them anymore?
Um es mit einem Zitat von Dr. Krone zu sagen, die Leute, die früher immer gesagt haben, der Wagen ist zu teuer, sind die Leute, die heute fragen, warum wir diesen schönen günstigen Wagen nicht mehr bauen.
Well, the people that asked why the trailer was so expensive are now the ones asking, why don't we build them anymore? It just simply wasn't possible to produce them with a profit. The wages of labor has become too high compared to East European competitors.
Ein weiterer Grund war im Prinzip, dass wir mit diesem Emsland vorher immer noch so ein bisschen das Sommerloch gefüllt haben, dass wir allerdings 2004 dann schon voll in der Entwicklung beziehungsweise auch in der
And it was mainly supposed to fill the gap since as of the year 2000 we began with the new big gigs.
Vom Emsland-Kipper noch einmal zurück. Wir haben, glaube ich, ganz tolle Impressionen nochmal von dem Alleslader mitgebracht.
Genau, da haben wir noch einige Bilder.
A few more pictures to the Alleslader. The piece in the museum is actually loaned by Lorraine Lucas. It's very interesting since his family run a dairy cattle farm and they cultivate the whole farm using Lanz and original KRONE machines. Lorraine Lucas restored the loader wagon and trialed it on his farm. And since we didn't have one of these in our museum, he loaned it to the KRONE Museum. Here you can see how you unload over the pickup and how it takes up through the pickup the material that's been harvested. It's about 60 years old today and still works perfectly.
Ja, was haben wir noch an Highlights im Museum?
What other highlights do we have in the museum?
Runde schon gesehen, ist natürlich unser WD-Flug.
Here's our VD cultivator,
Alle gewusst, steht für Wettler und Dorn. Das sind der Gutbesitzer und der Ingenieur, die irgendwo
which is a farm owner and engineer who believed that you could simplify the cultivating of large fields. Hanomag actually built it and allowed the entrance for Hanomag into the ag machinery.
weltweit vertrieben worden, war übrigens bei Hanomag der Einstieg in die Landtechnik und ja, von diesen über 900 Exemplaren
From over 900 pieces produced, and there's only one left, and it's in the KRONE Museum. There's another cultivator which is one step smaller.
Aber so wie das Gerät ausschaut, im Einsatz geht das nicht mehr, oder?
Oh, I had to look at this machine. It doesn't work, but yes, it can, since all machines in a KRONE Museum are fully functional. All motors run, everything. The whole cultivator has 6 cultivator blades, a steering wheel for lifting and lowering the cultivator blades, one steering wheel for the rear wheel, and the motor is a Hanomag motor 16 liters, 4 cylinders, and 80 horsepower. You actually have to start the motor fully manually, and once the engine is running, you can go. Here we can see the machine actually cultivating the ground up to 6 kilometers an hour. The smaller one was actually brought back from South Africa and wasn't sold for 95 years, and someone discovered it and brought it back to Germany.
Ja, aber auch die Firma KRONE, die Maschinenfabrik, hat eine.
Well, KRONE also produced cultivators.
Das ist ganz wichtig.
That's true. From 1948, as of 1948, we produced our first ground cultivator. At first, only conventional auxiliary cultivators, but later the reversible and husking and swingable plows. And as of 1994, we stopped producing them. That's when we stopped producing ground cultivating machines.
Ja, von unseren Flügen gehen wir doch einfach mal direkt über zu unserem nächsten Highlight.
The next highlight.
Was sehen wir hier?
Das nächste Highlight ist unser Landbaumotor.
It's the Landbaumotor. It appears to be a large tractor, and it's actually the grandfather of all tractors. This also has a Hanomag motor of 80 horsepower and 16 liters and 4 cylinders. On the rear, it's a rear-mounted mill, and it can be detached, allowing the tractor to be used for other applications. Only 2 examples known to exist. One fully functional one, like the one we have in a museum, and one is being used as a flower pot. It came to us from John Deere in a pretty terrible state. We had to put a lot of work into it. It was brought back to running order after standing still for 50 years. The engine was full of dirt. And we spent a lot of time getting this machine to run. In 2017, the machine was out in the field and working, being the highlight of the Nordhorn Field Day. Here we see the machine start, which is a lot of manpower involved. It's a very, very unique machine. It's only one example in the whole world, which makes it very, very special.
Ja, und schon sind wir beim nächsten Highlight. Was sehen
Here's the
wir?
next highlight.
Nächste Highlight wird auch auf
See
John Deere.
a very
Und,
early John Deere
Linie
combine harvester,
30, ein Präriedrescher,
the John Deere number
der
36.
im Prinzip eine sehr interessante Vergangenheit hat.
It has a very interesting history. It was exported to Algeria in 1940, brought back to France during the Algerian War in 1962, transported to the John Deere factory in Saarbrücken for marketing purposes in 1971. At the end of the 1970s, it was first displayed in the Agricultural Museum in Dietmarsch. And in 2010, it was brought back to the Ag Machinery Museum Gut Steinhof near Braunschweig in desperate need of repair. 2012 to 2014, it was brought back to its former glory by KRONE in Spelle. Special about this combine, it has a slope compensator. It has a 6-cylinder onboard engine, meaning you don't need a PDO shaft of a tractor, meaning it can be pulled by 10 or 20 horses, 10 to 20 horses. We have a 5.2 meter wide cutter bar mounted on the side, and you need 2 men to operate it. 1 driver and 1 operator. It already had a grain tank and is fully functional. Here we see the slope commentator, which is the spike bar. We see the machine harvesting the corn, cutting it very cleanly, combining it, and the finished grain in the grain tank. We have to keep in mind that this machine is 80 years old and running like a clock. In this example, it's actually being pulled by a tractor from a Lanz tractor from the museum. If you want to see these videos in full length, you'll be able to find them on YouTube. That was almost it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed the virtual presentation of the museum. Thank you very much, Niklas. But of course, we still have our weekly raffle for you, all viewers, to take part in. Just scan the QR code with your cell phone, answer the question correctly, and from all participants with the correct answer, we will give away 5 KRONE history books where you can read all about the company's history over the last 110 years. Our winner from last week's raffle, and it goes to Philip Behrens from Wildeshausen. Congratulations to you. We'll be back live next week where it's going to be all about harvesting silage and grass. We'll have loader wagons, rayon balers, and corn choppers in action. If you want to see the KRONE Museum live, we hope it opens up next year, every Thursdays. Every Thursday from 2 to 5, except on public holidays. If you want to visit with a group, send us a mail to museum@krone.de, and more information is available under www.kronemuseum.de. That was it tonight. We'll have you have a happy new year. Stay safe and sound till next week.